Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's first session. Uh, we are honoured this afternoon to be joined by Olivier Morel, who is the Assistant General Manager for Ilex. Uh, Olivier will talk to us today about the integration between Vein ID5 and Ilex and how the two solutions have worked. Uh, we have just as a bit of background, we have a long-term relationship with Ilex. Hitachi and Ilex have worked on several large customers before, and Ilex have a lot of experience in integrating our physical readers with their technology. So they're probably a little bit ahead of some of the other partners in understanding how the finger vein technology implements and what we can do. So, Olivier, do you want to start the slides? And
Yeah,
I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
no problem. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Olivier, and I will share my screen. That's okay, and we can start. Is it good for you?
Yep, it's good.
Okay, I let you the two first slide if you want to introduce.
Yeah. So as we've talked about this morning, and I think we've only got we've got a couple of different people on that haven't been on earlier. So Hitachi's had the finger vein technology for just over 20 years now, but we've always relied on an infrared finger vein scanner or a physical device to read the finger vein pattern to enable us to authenticate someone. The big shift with Vein ID5 is that we're now able to do this using a standard laptop camera. So simply by raising their hand to the laptop camera, as you see in step 3, the camera scans their fingers, segregates the fingers and picks up the vein patterns. We then take that vein pattern, encrypt it, and store it as a mathematical representation mixed with some encryption to stop it being reverse engineered, to enable us to have a certificate that we can then match back to prove user authentication and identification later. So next slide, please, Olivier. So this has enabled us to integrate this into a piece of software called Vein ID5, and using this technology we can integrate into lots of different solutions. And the idea behind today was to start to showcase some of the different solutions we can integrate into using the OpenID protocol, and how removal of passwords will save time, improve security, help users to have a better experience. And this is the reason passwords have existed for so long, is there's not been something that provides them with a better experience. Almost any other option they can pick invariably says or invariably gives them a different user experience. So if we look at two-factor authentication or multi-factor, it involves them carrying extra hardware and remembering to do multiple steps. So enabling them to do something in a single step that not only replaces the password, but actually proves their identity to a much higher level by it being something that's intrinsically part of them, rather than just something they could be in possession with. It helps remove a lot of the risks of that we see with passwords. So, your biometric can't be written down, can't be shared, can't be borrowed by somebody else, and can't be stolen. And that's where Vein ID5 is really something that we believe is going to make a huge difference to the marketplace. And hopefully the integrations with our partners will enable people to make good use of that. So, Olivier, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I will talk about who we are, what we do, and how we work with Hitachi. And so let's start with some few information about Ilex International, who we are, and perhaps after we'll do a big focus on the solutions we offer in the access management domain. And then we'll finish by a small demonstration illustrating the integration between Hitachi technologies and our technology. The name is Sign and Go Global Single Sign-On. So let's start with a presentation of Ilex, who we are. So we are a French software vendor We are a pure player. We are dedicated on the identity and access management domain, identity and access IAM technologies. French software vendor. We have more than 30 years of experience and perhaps more, almost 20 years in the IAM domain. So we are considered as perhaps pioneers of the IAM market in France particularly, and now around Europe. We are more centralized around France. I mean, North Europe like Belgium, like Switzerland near France, and North Africa like Morocco. We have a kind of this kind of presence, and we work with a lot of partners, and we'll have a word on that, of course. At Ilex, we believe that the customers we have, they do the value of our portfolio and of our offer. So we are really near and close to our customers, and work with them on the roadmap of our products and listen to them. And the Hitachi story with Ilex was perhaps started by a customer's need, of course. We have a 360 degrees coverage IAM product line, and we'll have a word on that. And we try to do as simple, as secure, and as scalable as possible when we work on identity and access management. And you probably know that it's not really simple, but we try to do our best to make this kind of project simple and keep the security and the scalability focus, keep the focus on that to be able to bring a lot of value to our customers. These customers, they have a lot of issues. They are waiting for a lot of benefits, even if we're talking about security, of course, but also ergonomy, also return on investment, also perhaps digital transformation and what they have to do to integrate some things, and perhaps the regulation compliance that is a key point that brings MFA, a multi-factor authentication solution. So all these benefits are covered by our solutions. We are part of a lot of associations working on cybersecurity in Europe, as Exatrust, that is the main one. We are talking about an IAM strategy. I mean, what we believe is that we have to consider everything from a global point of view and have a global strategy on identity and access management. The point to, when we want to do a multi-factor or biometric authentication, like with Hitachi solutions, we have to think large and perhaps be sure that we are going to manage our identities, our entitlements, and then we'll bring some access management rules and some authentication method to help the users to have ergonomy at the same time as security. So we have a big product line, a huge product line based on two perhaps families of products. One is the access management side, and we'll talk a lot of that, so I won't spend time here on this particular point. But also on identity management, and in identity management, we work on managing the user lifecycle, for example, the entitlements lifecycle, the automatic provisioning operations that you are supposed to do on your information system to perhaps provision your applications, to manage the onboarding, offboarding workflows of your users on this information system. We also think about our customers, about the customers of our customers, their users, the users of their information system, their employees, their partners. So that's quite large, and that's why I was talking about the 360 degrees vision of IAM for a company, for an organization. Behind these concepts of technical, perhaps functional and technical concepts for IAM, we have, of course, product lines, and we'll talk mainly on this webinar about our product called Sign and Go Global SSO. But it's also a kind of family of products, and we have several modules, and we'll do a small focus on it. But we also have our identity management and entitlement management family around the product's name, Mabo People Pack, and IDSphere, that is the last one. And on IDSphere, we are really focused on CIAM, I mean Customer Identity and Access Management benefits. So the goal of this webinar is not to talk about the right side of this slide, but more on the left side. I mean, more about access management, authentication, single sign-on, identity federation, how we integrated with Hitachi. A few words now on Ilex again, just to let you an idea of who we are. We are about 70 employees. We have about 250 customers, perhaps near 300 now, and about 40 million users are using our solutions on the several products you've seen before. We also have 30 years of experience, as I said, and as you can see on the graph on the right, we work on every domain. I mean, we have customers in the finance world, in the public sector, healthcare, also in industry, media, everywhere. And that is really important because every domain has an influence on the other one. When you consider some perhaps users' kinematics or users' journey in the healthcare market around authentication and access control, that will help our solutions also to bring new solutions to another domain, like in the finance or transport or media. That is really good to share experience between the several customers we have to help them solve the issues they have. About these customers, so the goal here is not to stop on every line, of course, but just to say that in the finance world, perhaps you know some names here because they are quite European references, but huge banks like Société Générale or Crédit Agricole or perhaps BPCU, Natixis, that are quite known. We are about more than 100,000 people users of our solutions, even for Generali Assurance or French Ministry of Defense, French Ministry of Culture, Internal Affairs, and huge groups also like Dassault Aviation in the defense and industry, like in the media world, like Canal Plus, for example, where we are offering authentication and single sign-on solutions for the 10 millions of subscribers they have. Okay, so a lot of reference. These companies, they can go from perhaps hundreds of users to millions of users. So we are quite agnostic on the size of the company and on the domain, business domain of this company. Of course, you will find on our website, just to let you the link here, a lot of success stories about what they have to solve, how they solved it with our solutions. If we talk about authentication or perhaps identity management or just single sign-on or self-service reset password, everything around the IAM domain, you'll find a lot of material here to understand the success stories of our customers. Okay, one important point is to say that when we work for our customers, of course, we need a channel, we need a network. And this network is based on two main influencers. I mean, system integrators who are in charge of implementing our solution on customers' sites and customers' infrastructure. So we are going to help them, for example, with our professional services, but also really important, the technology partners like Hitachi and perhaps other one, because they bring solutions, they offer solutions which are going to complete our portfolio. And we'll saw after that on the authentication method, we need several solutions because we have several usages in one organization. We have different business models. We have different context for users. We have different families of users, families and environment. And for all these users, we need to find a good way to authenticate in the good environment at the good time for the good application. So that's why we need technology partners, and we work with several of them in a big channel association. And Hitachi is really part of this kind of technology partners. For us, it's really strategic. Let's talk now about the solution, if you're okay with that, and we'll do a focus on the Ilex access management portfolio, and I mean the project name Sign and Go Global SSO. That is the one that is integrated with the Hitachi solution VENA 85. So what we see on our customers' environment and perhaps the problems they have or the situations they have is, when we consider an information system, we have everything. I mean, internal users, external users, we have internal applications, perhaps fat client application, web applications, cloud, SaaS applications, external ones, of course. We also have external users, perhaps in non-trusted environments, and of course, internal users, perhaps on trusted environments connected to the Windows domain of the company, for example. We also have devices, I mean, some companies' devices, but if you grant some BYOD in your company, you will have to manage some devices that you not control. So the environment is not really trusted. So we have everything that is quite logical and what we see perhaps on 100% of our customers. When you consider authentication and access control and single sign-on, the risk is to have as many solutions as usages. I mean, you are going to use an enterprise single sign-on solution to deal with your internal world. I mean, your fat client application, the protection of your laptops, for example, and the GINA or credential provider window of your workstations and laptops. So perhaps solution one will be an enterprise single sign-on one. Solution two will be perhaps a web access management solution, perhaps based on a open source solution or perhaps an industrial one, but you are going to do some web single sign-on, for example, filling some forms, HTTP forms for your applications, giving some specific cookies, or perhaps rewriting some re-encoding a URL, or perhaps doing what you want, dealing with HTTP headers, basic HTTP window, everything. So you are going to use this kind of solution. Another one will be perhaps dedicated to identity federation and to integrate your federated applications. Basically, your cloud application, like for example Office 365 or Google Apps environment, or every kind of SAML or OpenID Connect or O2 application. And of course, you will have perhaps a dedicated solution for the mobile world, and perhaps based on your MDM technology, you are going to try to bring some single sign-on and strong authentication in this mobile environment. What we offer to our customers is to rely on just one solution that is based on one infrastructure. The infrastructure is going to bring the authentication, access control, single sign-on, federation, audit, administration features, and we are going to protect everything in this world based on several agents. For example, these agents will be server-based or perhaps installed directly on the laptops, on the mobile environment, on the smartphone, tablets, laptops, workstation, or perhaps even in the Citrix or TSE farms of virtualization. And we'll have agents for identity federation, of course. The goal is to have a kind of global, unique infrastructure that is going to offer you a single platform, a single point of administration, single point of authentication, and single point of audit to manage all your usages in terms of authentication, access control, and single sign-on. So we are really able to replace as many solutions, for example, the 4 solutions we saw in the previous slide, by just one. And we did exactly that in part. For some of our customers, they were working with as many solutions as usages, and now they just have one. And of course, that's more interesting in terms of administration, audit, and of course, mutualization. I mean cost. So Sign & Go is really based on that. This kind of infrastructure can be on-prem, can be installed where you want, for example, in an Azure environment or AWS, or that will be also available in SaaS mode in the next few months. So this global approach allows us to offer this kind of unique solution. We have a shared infrastructure, as I said, and administration that is really important, because you are going to configure all your authentication schemas, all your single sign-on environment, even if we are talking about fat client application or just protection of the workstation or just web single sign-on kinematics. And we'll really have a unified access management solution. Of course, we try and we are compliant with all the single sign-on standards. I mean, standards of federation, like WS Trust, like OpenID Connect 02 or SAML2. And we are really able to work in a scalable way, as we'll see on a slide later. In this schema on the right, what we try to offer is to consider all your users, to consider all your applications, all your environments, and perhaps the several authentication methods. Of course, one of Hitachi here, but perhaps you also have old cards dedicated to some specific usages, perhaps some FIDO token, perhaps some smartphones used by some of people, and the NID 5 Hitachi will complete all this family of authentication methods, and we are going to integrate them. That's why we work as a hub of authentication, in fact, and we also a lot of feature about that. So on the global feature of Sign and Go, we have the authentication features. I mean, adaptive authentication, multi-factor authentication, everything about access control, everything about single sign-on and identity federation, and also everything about administration and audit. On adaptive and multi-factor authentication, I think the next slide is going to talk about that point. We have to consider just the fact that authentication is not binary operation. It's now a kind of workflow. We have workflows of authentication because we are going to check a little, we have to check things where the user is. This is the context where my user is okay for me. Perhaps to access the same application, I won't ask the same level of authentication if I am inside the company or outside the company, or in my or in the country where my headquarters are, or perhaps in another country that is considered more risky. For example, in the strategy of my company, perhaps the hour of connection or the behavior of the connection won't be the same. So we are going to play and to leverage the level of authentication and depending on the context of the usage. That's what we are calling adaptive authentication. Of course, on the multi-factor authentication, we are able to integrate with a lot of technology. I will talk about that after. And we are going to base our access rules on several advanced features, like, for example, different criteria like authentication, time zone, origin, user profile, a lot of things like that. Another way also, another thing important in this slide is the way we are going to make the passwords disappear in your environment, because once you have managed the first level of authentication, for example, with the biometric technology of Hitachi, we are going to take into perhaps replace the operations made by the users. I mean, entering logins and passwords for all their application, just by our technology is going to do exactly the same, based on identity federation standards, but also on web single sign-on or enterprise single sign-on classical methods, like, for example, filling a form in the application because the application is not compliant to federation standards, or perhaps the application is a DOS application or an AS400 application, or perhaps we are just talking about fat client applications. So we can do single sign-on on everything. What we do here, everything is centralized. I mean, we have audit information about everything, authentication, authorization, and audit information about the users, the application, the roles, etc., etc. And everything is centralized in the platform. If we do a small focus on authentication, as I said, what is important is to consider several ways to authenticate. That's, for example, the methods we have here. Of course, so we'll have some Hitachi, but also other technology like RSA, Morpho, NeoWave, YubiKey, etc. We'll have some native mods offered by the solution. I mean, Sign and Go Authenticator, that is an MFA based on a mobile phone, mobile application, multi-factor authentication technology based on a mobile phone and a mobile application. We have some customers using some contactless cards, using some FIDO tokens, etc., etc. And also in the B2C world, of course, we are compliant with Facebook, Azure, Google, France Connect, ITSMI protocols method, sorry, to deal with the authentication. What is important is to perhaps offer to our customers the same level of authentication, whatever the environment. I mean, I can work on my web browser, on my credential provider. I mean, at the level of the Windows authentication window, and on my mobile environment. So whatever the environment, we are going to be as a hub of authentication and control the authentication. Then, as I said, we are talking about workflows of authentication, and that, I mean, based on criteria, we are going to have behaviors, like the criteria can be based on localization, perhaps on the context of the user, the authentication level, etc., etc. I think we'll have in the small demo after an example of this kind of behavior. But we have to think in terms of workflows of authentication and not just as binary method to do an authentication. Of course, when we do authentication, we need to think about self-service, because, for example, if I work with a FIDO token, what happens if I don't have my FIDO token with me? If it has been stolen, or if it's broken, or perhaps my reader is not okay, or perhaps my card, I forgot my card at my home, or perhaps my phone doesn't have any battery. So we everything have to think about that. It's not just the fact that I don't remember my password, for example. It works with everything. As soon as I do authentication with something, I have to need perhaps an alternative if I don't have this something. So for example, with Hitachi technology, we use my hand. So my hand is okay, but I also use the camera of my laptop. So if the camera is not okay, I need perhaps another way to authenticate to let the user work, but with the same level of authentication. That's why it's important to consider several methods of authentication in a huge company, of course. When we deal with 30 people, perhaps we'll find a good way to perhaps have all our users with the same level of authentication, the same method of authentication. But in a big company with hundreds, thousands of and millions of users, thousands perhaps, that will not be the same story. So we have to think about self-service, and we offer a lot of self-service features also available at the level of the credential provider, in the mobile environment, in the web browser. After that, we also have a solution, but we'll see it in the small demo. So Sign and Go Authenticator is a MFA technology based on a mobile app that is available as an app, or also as an API, an SDK. That is fully available to integrate in your applications. For example, if you are a bank or a finance organization, you'll need perhaps the API of Sign and Go to bring some DSP2 compliance to your applications, payment applications, for example. And then we also, as we do a lot of authentication, and we have a lot of partners, we also offer a solution based on that is going to manage the life cycle of the tokens of authentication. That's what we call a CMS, a card management system, but it's not really dedicated to cards. It's also dedicated to everything used, physical token, for example, everything used to authenticate people, like a card, a USB key, a phone, perhaps even a screen or a certificate or something like that. Okay, so with this solution, we are able to offer a kind of strategy, a kind of roadmap to our customers. Usually they start with one priority. For example, let's, in this example, consider that my customer wants to start with a self-service reset password and perhaps offer the VNID Hitachi technology to help people to reset themselves their password to access some applications, for example. And then the need will be to deploy strong authentication on workstations environments, and perhaps bring some enterprise single sign-on solution once we have the primary authentication that is considered as really good, and perhaps extend our single sign-on environments to the my web SSO portal and my identity federation environments, and finish by my mobile single sign-on, and to bring everything regarding single sign-on in my mobile environment. With our technology, we can start small and deploy step by step some components of our solution. But the main important thing is that they are all pieces of one just global solution, one infrastructure. That's really easy to bring step by step, to start small, to have a roadmap, to have a strategy, and to build this strategy in the next 2-3 years to implement everything in one's organization. And that's why we say at the end that we need to think access management in a global way. So now, as I see that time is going on, what we do with Hitachi is that we integrated the Hitachi technology because, as I say, when we consider authentication in an organization, we have to think about a lot of things. Who are my users? What are their usages? The context they are working on? What do they want? What do they need? Why do they don't want? Etc. Etc. So we have to think about all the usages, and it's really obvious that we have several ways to authenticate people in one organization. It depends on the business and the environment, of what we have, etc., etc. So one big advantage of Hitachi technology is that you don't need everything. You just need your workstation, the camera of this workstation, or perhaps if you don't have one, you are going to plug a camera and with an USB key, USB port, of course. But like my laptop, for example, is my usage, and I will just use my hands to enroll myself. As we saw on the first slide of this, and I think that you perhaps know this technology, we are going to enroll the users just based on the camera of the laptops of the user. And that's really useful because we don't need any token. We don't need a key. We don't need a card. We don't need a phone. We don't need everything. We just need our working environment and ourselves, of course. So that's why we had a lot of customers asking us for integrate with them. And we knew, as we said at the first minutes of this webinar, that we knew Hitachi because a few years ago, we were already working on the physical readers for Venn ID authentication, particularly in the finance environment, finance world, for traders, for example, in a bank. And that perfectly completes our range of authentication methods to offer more and more solutions to our customers when they have to consider several solutions. So perhaps part of their users are going to use a card, part of them are going to use a sign-and-go authenticator technology, and part of them are going to use the Venn ID 5 technology because that will be particularly adapted to their usage, their needs, and the ergonomic they are waiting for in front of such security objectives. As you know, for now, we have an OpenID Connect integration. Our technology, Sign&Go, is totally compliant with, is certified by the OpenID consortium. And the integration with Hitachi was really simple. They are kind of what we call an IDP, an identity provider. And as a service provider, we trust the authentication brought by their technology. And now we are working on going more and more deeper with them and working with the Hitachi SDK to have this kind of integration at the level of the workstation, as we are able to bring some authentication methods directly at this level. That's really interesting to offer the users to authenticate directly at this level also. We also provide with them access control for web environment. So on the demo, we'll see that, but of course, that will be exactly the same for FAT client and for credential provider association. So we are really the association become a specialist of the multi-factor authentication, the strong authentication that is Hitachi Venn ID 5, and a global actor of full access management solution that is Ilex Sign&Go Global Single Sign-On. If I go through a quick demo, let's do it on a video. It is, oops, sorry. So to start, let's explain what we see here. Okay, so in this environment, I had to do a demo because I want to show some few things on the right of the screen. We are going to log on a portal. This is an applicative portal, where I have some single sign-on features to access all my applications. And on this portal, that is really an example, I can access to my, with several ways of several schemas of authentication. Of course, in the true life, we offer 2, 3. Or perhaps depending the users, we are going to dedicate some schemas of authentication for this usage, and for others, they won't see exactly the same, but that's just an example. When I go to my portal, I can select finally here the way I want to authenticate. So among several methods. As we see here, we'll see the Venn ID biometrics, Venn ID 5 from Hitachi, but let's start perhaps with just a login and password to see the portal behind. This is an applicative portal, I mean the customer portal. Of course, it's just an example and it's going to let me launch my applications and have some single sign-on this application. Once I'm authenticated on my portal, just here with a login and a password, I can access to my applications and, for example, launch them. So my Google environment, my Office 365 environments, and perhaps just opening some few tabs, and my identity management solution, where the portal asks me what is the role I want to take to connect and to before doing the single sign-on. So just to show that the solution can be multi-profile. So when I have everything here, if I go in my applications, I will find my, I have a single sign-on, and I'm Olivier in this identity management solution. I will have my single sign-on based on perhaps SAML on my Google, my Office, I think it's WS Trust, on my Office 365 environment, and on my SAML for my Google Apps environment. As we see that for this user, he has a known environment, his own environment, and he has enrolled a Sign and Go Authenticator application, so he can use this authentication method to connect to the portal. And he also has some FIDO UTF token or WebAuthn token, and he has enrolled also token. He can enroll another one, etc. So he has his own environment and perhaps has several ways to authenticate. So I can do exactly the same to connect to my portal and perhaps access to this portal with other methods of authentication. Let's do that. As you see on the right of the screen, I have a small Ubico key and a smart card, and I have my phone. And on this phone, I will use, for this phone, I will use my MFA application, and for the other one, I will use a key. So if I start my new session, selecting the Sign and Go authenticator method, I will just give the application my login, so that is the OMOR, and then I will be prompted, I will receive the push notification on my smartphone, as you see on the right, and this push notification will be validated once I will present my face. If I am on an iPhone, for example, with Face ID, or here is an Android system, I will just present my fingerprint on the reader of the phone, and then I will enter the application. So I have single sign-on. I'm connected in my environment, and I can access to my applications. I can do exactly the same with a FIDO token, for example. So for a FIDO token, I need my token, of course. I need my reader, so that's a USB key, and I can access with my YubiKey or perhaps a kind of generic FIDO token to my system. So I also enter my login. I take on the right, you can see my hand, I think. I can put my key and just press the button when the system asks for that. Once it's recognized, it's quite long on the video, doesn't matter. So verification, sorry, it's in French. Vérification de votre identité. And then I can push that. I can push the button and enter. Here, as we see, we don't ask anything. That is not a biometric system. So we can perhaps check that for some of specific application, we won't trust this kind of authentication, because here, if I let my token on my desktop, for example, and someone comes and take it and enter my login and push the key, he will be authenticated at my place. That's why perhaps for simple application, if we consider that this token is really used for everything and that the user is never letting it on the desktop, for example, on his office, that will be okay. But if we want to secure more, we can add some PIN code, we can add some other schema of authentication. So I can take my FIDO token plus my Event ID system. That's why adaptive authentication is really important. Here, for example, I will let the single sign-on go to my Google environment, but if I want to go to my Sage HR application, I won't trust the first level of authentication. I will ask again, perhaps a notification on the MFA mobile app of the user. So I think that's it's going to okay. If I go to the Sage application here, I will okay, just to say that I have, of course, the single sign-on environment because I was authenticated on my portal and I can access to my application. But what I want to say is to show that we can associate different methods of authentication. And for example, here on Sage, yes, I'm logged in my portal, I'm authenticated, but I want to check that the user is really this user, because this application is perhaps more sensitive, more critical, and I will ask a notification. As we see on the right, the user is going to present his fingerprint and he will access to his application. So this small demo is just to have an idea of what we can do. Everything you saw here is available also at the level of the workstation. I mean, directly when you want to open your Windows session, and we also bring some single sign-on and fat client application and everything. So exactly the same now with the integration with VenID. So the same portal, and this is in this video. The video is made by a guy from Hitachi, that is Adam, and she's going to connect to our portal. So the integration was really simple. He's going to connect to our portal to select this time the VenID 5 technology among the list of authentication schemas, and just enter his login, and we are going to prompt him to present his hand and connect to the system. So when he does that, Adam is going to present his hand and strongly authenticate himself with his right hand or left hand, depending on what he selected. Hi, Adam, and that will be okay. He'll be able to enter the portal. As we see here, he has less rights than me, but it's not the same profile, but he has access to his applications and have single sign-on on them. So that's really simple. And this kind of technology is just a small example. We can integrate perfectly this technology to show some new usages, a new method of authentication in the world we already have on this point. Oops, where is it? So 5 minutes left, and that's the end of that, my conclusion. So finally, we are really happy to have this kind of integration with Hitachi because it answers to customers' needs. It brings some new method of authentication, strong authentication that is really simple to use because you just need the camera of your laptop and you don't need any tokens, so you don't have to manage this kind of information. Of course, you need an identity management solution because the enrollment is a key part of this technology, and you have to know your users before letting them to enroll and access applications. But we complete perfectly this kind of issues with our global portfolio because we are also more than having a unique offer for access management. We also bring the identity management features that we need to control the rights, to control the entitlements, and to manage the life cycle of the users, to be sure that the users who are going to enroll themselves are going to be real users of your organization. So I think that's okay. I will perhaps let Andy finish this presentation and perhaps take some questions if we have some questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Olivier, thank you very much. That was really informative and very comprehensive. So have we got any questions from anybody for Olivier at the moment? I thought it was particularly an interesting where you're looking at all the different authentication methods, and we compare the fact that, you know, with many of the others, you're doing 2 or 3 steps, and obviously the difference we get is that with VenID 5, we can complete an authentication of a user with a single step. And that, for us, I think, is where we think there's a difference, and it can add some functionality for the user they might find more pleasant. Inserting keys, pushing buttons, and losing keys, losing buttons is always a challenge. I don't think we've got any questions, Olivier. So if that's everything, I think. Thank you very much for your time and the presentation.
Yeah, that was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And we will talk soon, no doubt. All right.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, and bye-bye, and see you soon. Bye-bye.